So let's talk about his first pose for a second. So again, I didn't want to have Max's face completely blank because there is some thought process happening in his head. He is looking at his phone, he's kind of bored. Maybe he's been in this line for a long time. So I have the eyes half closed, they're looking down at the phone. There's a little bit of thought process happening in the face. I have a little bit of an eyebrow furrow there, and he's kind of biting on his lower lip a little bit. But overall, it's not any major expression, nothing crazy is happening around him. And here we have that line of action I drew in yellow, and I tried to incorporate that into the body. So you can see the face facing one way, then the chest the other way, the hip is sticking out and it's higher on that side. And then the weight is over this screen left leg, which is pretty straight. And then the other one is just on the side, kind of resting. The hands were kind of tricky to pose for this just because Max's hands are pretty big. So it doesn't look exactly like Brian's hands, but that's okay. You kind of just want to play around with it and find an appealing pose and then just go with that. It doesn't have to be exactly like the reference. I actually tried that and it didn't even look good. So I thought this was better. But that's why it takes quite a while to make your first pose, or any pose for that matter. But especially in this exercise, just because we stay in this pose for a while, I really wanted to take time and make it really nice. So as always, you want to grab all your bones by pressing A and then press I to make sure everything on your first frame is keyed. And what I'm gonna do now is actually start looking for those golden poses in my animation, which I marked with the yellow G. So I'm just gonna scrub until I find one. So the first one is on frame 30. I'm just gonna put a marker there. Maybe I'll put my marker on frame 1 as well. Then frame 38 and so on. Okay, and frame 143 is the last frame of my reference video, but as we mentioned before, it feels like there's a little bit of animation missing. So I'm just gonna give myself extra frames for that. And now it will be pretty easy just to go to frame 30, make a key, and now I can use my up and down arrows to just jump between these two poses. But I'm actually gonna switch my reference to the clean version just because it's kind of hard to see things with the white overlay on the image and also just the drawings on top of it. So from now on, I'm just gonna have this reference on the side and I'm just gonna use my clean reference. Also, don't forget to click on this refresh button, otherwise your reference video is not gonna be playing. And then you're ready to go to your pose mode and start working. So we have a key on frame 30. And the first thing I'm gonna do is just zoom in on my video. And I'm just gonna use the up and down arrow just to flip between the two poses and see what's different between them. So clearly the very first obvious thing I notice is that Brian is now looking up instead of down. And there's a little bit of a change of expression, which I also had mentioned when we were analyzing the reference in Sync Sketch. And in terms of the body movement, I know there's some, I can see the hands going up. The body's staying pretty still, but I'm sure there is a little bit of movement. It's just hard to see because we didn't use a tripod to record this reference. And this is where we didn't listen to our own advice. So now you see why you should use a tripod, because you see it's hard to tell what's happening. The thing that does help is instead of flipping with the up and down arrow, just kind of scrub back and forth. And when you do that, you can see the movement better. So the hip is kind of traveling more to the left. And you can see the typing on the hands and a little bit of that shifting on the phone, which we'll leave for later. We'll just keep a mental note of that. But mostly just a little bit of a weight shift on the body. This particular weight shift is not necessarily a body mechanics thing, just because there's no reason right now for him to shift the weight. It's just a natural adjustment when you're standing. So let's do that. I usually like starting with the center of gravity and working my way out from there. So I'm just grabbing the cog and I'm just pressing G and moving it just very slightly to the left. And again, I'm just flipping and looking both at the camera view and my perspective view. I want it to be very subtle. I don't need more than that. And you have to remember that chain reaction in the body, right? So if my cog is moving a little bit to the left, I would expect my hip to travel just a bit higher as well. If you feel like it's moving too much, you can hold shift while you're doing this, and it will give you a little bit better control. Or what I like to do is have the graph editor here and then just go to the Z rotation And if it's too much, I'll just press GY and bring the value lower a little bit closer to that previous value. This is how I prefer to work. So again, just a little bit of back and forth. And it's subtle enough. So I'll leave that for now. And let me continue scrubbing. I can also see that when the weight shifts, the chest travels to the right a little bit. So here it's a little bit more straighter, and now it's leaning a little bit more to the right, and it's very subtle again. So what I'll do, I can either just grab the chest and do that, but it's more isolated to the top of the body. So I'm just gonna grab the center of gravity again and just rotate it slightly on the y-axis. And be careful, I accidentally went to frame 31 instead of frame 30. So I'm just gonna grab that and shift it back to frame 30. And maybe make it a little bit smaller. And I'm gonna go back and forth again. So that works, it's just the head is really stuck in place right now. If you look here on the screen right. And if Max was continuing to look down at this point, I would want to fix that. I don't want the head to ever feel stuck in place while the body is moving, but it's okay now because the head is going to be lifting up, so that's not going to be an issue. So let's bring the hands a little bit higher. Again, you can see that in the reference. Just bring them up, maybe a little bit closer to the body. You want to be working in all of your axes. You don't want to always just be working from the front view and just move it side to side. You maybe want to bring it a little bit closer or a little bit farther away. And I'm also going to rotate the hands up a little bit. And maybe on another axis as well. There we go. And I have a feeling there's a little bit of a breath happening. It's so subtle, but I feel like I can add that to the animation. It's not going to hurt. So what I like to do personally is just grabbing the X scale axis and just expanding the chest just a little bit and then bringing the shoulders up. So I just move it up a little bit on the X axis, which works well with the hands too because the hands are going up a little. But what I don't like is the elbows traveling outwards that much. So I'm just gonna take those and just slightly bring it inwards. And sometimes instead of having my mouse in the perspective view while doing that, I move it over to the camera view. And here I can make those adjustments from the camera view angle because ultimately that's what matters to me. So now it looks like Max is taking a breath. And of course the biggest thing here is the head looking up. So I'm gonna rotate it up. And let's see if there's any Z or Y rotation as well. So there definitely is. Here you can see the nose is more towards the left side of the face. And here it's still a little bit towards the left, but it's more straight on. So I'm definitely gonna do that. Maybe this much. And the head is also more straighter this way. And since the head is going up, I'm also gonna follow the connectivity in the body and just slightly move the neck. It's just like 1 pixel, but I feel like it helps because you add it everywhere. So the chest will move up a little too. And we also wanna do that with the breath. So when he inhales, you want the chest to kind of rotate back a little bit, so that's perfect. Plus the hands are going up, so everything kind of feels more connected now. The next thing we need is the eyes. So I'm gonna open the eyelids a little bit more. I still want the eyes to feel a little bit lazy. I don't want them to be too wide just because there isn't anything crazy happening, right? And I'm gonna grab the eyes, bring them up. And here I really wanna see what it looks like in the camera view, if it's looking good or not. And I don't want him to be looking straight at me, so I'm just gonna shift him a little bit to the side as if he's looking past the camera. Now the eyelids are a little bit wavy, you can see that, and that's because I was using all these tweakers to make the looking down position look nice, but they don't work so well with the face rotated upwards, so I'm gonna take some time to shape that. Okay, so the eyes look better now, and I'm also going to lift the eyebrows a little bit because I feel like usually when you're paying attention to your phone and then you notice something ahead of you, your eyebrows go a little bit up. even just to acknowledge that there is a little bit of a change. So let's do that next. So I'll bring them up a bit, but also I don't want the furrow to be as pronounced. I'm just gonna relax the eyebrows a little. And maybe I'll push this eyebrow just a little bit higher. And let's bring these eyelid shapers a little higher too. For the lower face, I want to start relaxing this pout that he has. And I'm not gonna do it fully right now, but I'm just gonna start easing out of it a little. So I have this lip curl property. I'm gonna reduce it now. And start pushing this out a little. So it's still there, but it's more subtle now. And by the time he looks down, I'm just gonna fully relax it. And you can see the pose is still kind of bored. He is half lidded, but there's a little bit of questioning in his eyebrows. And we're gonna scrub back and forth again. Actually, I wanna be seeing both the camera view and my perspective view. So I'm just gonna turn off my controllers and just go back and forth. See if it looks good, if it kind of matches the reference, what I'm trying to extract from it. I feel like his head might be rotated a little too high. So I'll just bring it lower. And that's my x-axis. So let's bring it closer to the previous pose. And because the head went down a little bit, I need to bring this eye controller a little higher, which is my Z location. And let me adjust the direction he's looking at a little more, because I feel like he was looking too far left, and I think that's good. Okay, so now we have two poses, and let's go to our next marker, which is frame 38, and work on that pose. Select everything with A, press I to key it, and now because we have a key, we're able to go back and forth between this key and the last key. So because this pose on 38 is very similar to frame 1, I'm also gonna just see what's different there. So the head tilt is a little different, as well as the chest. I feel like the hip is pushed forward more, even between these two poses. So those are the differences. In terms of the eye direction and just the expression on the upper half of the face, I can more or less borrow that from frame 1 and just make small changes, because I don't want it to feel like we went from pose A to pose B and back to pose A. That feels very lazy. I can definitely take it and save myself some time, but then I want to adjust it a little bit. So I'm gonna grab the eyes and the head for now, the neck, and the whole face. And I'm just gonna, for now, Control C frame 1 and Control V onto frame 38. Now I'm gonna do that rotation on the head where it's more straighter. And because I had the furrow on the eyebrows and then I didn't have that much anymore, I don't want to go back to a furrow again. So I'm gonna just continue having them relaxed. And this questioning eyebrow that I had before, I'm just gonna still maintain it a little bit. And I feel like the eyes are okay the way they are. I don't really need to change that. Now we need the center of gravity. We need to start pushing forward. This hip was pushed forward more. So I'm just gonna compare these two. And because that's pushed forward, I feel like the top of the body needs to rotate back. And the shoulders are starting to go lower, so I feel like the exhale is gonna start happening. Now he looks a little bit like he is stuck in place in his shoulder area. So I'll push it forward more. And since the head is going down, I'm also gonna move the neck and the chest. And maybe the upper chest a little bit too, just so it's more relaxed. And the chest feels like it's more rotated this way compared to pose 1. Let me get rid of that inhale. So I'm just gonna grab the scale X and put it on 1 and rotate these shoulders lower. And do the same thing again with the elbows. And I know this is not enough frames for the exhale, so when I have more frames, I'm actually gonna start easing into that instead of having it fully done here. But as of right now, my next golden pose is all the way on frame 65, so I know it's not gonna take that long. So once I have more information added here, that's when I'm gonna start playing with that. Something I can do right now though is grabbing the cog, and this forward movement I have on the y-axis here. Oh, I need to make sure this is in constant. So again, grab everything, all your keys, switch to constant. So I want to start easing into that. I feel like I don't want to have it straight here and then within 8 frames it travels forward. I want to start easing into that a little. As well as this rotation on the pelvis on the x-axis. I'm gonna start working on that through here. The X rotation on the cog as well. Actually, because he's looking up, I feel like it might be easing quite a lot into that next frame. The hands right now are traveling too far down, so I'll bring them up. And let's add a little bit of rotation sideways for that typing motion. So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of scrubbing and just jumping between poses, checking your reference, checking to see if the character is looking good, if everything is making sense in different views, and just trying to think a little bit ahead and trying to add some of those eases if you can. Like I said here, between frame 30 and 38, I don't want the huge change on the pelvis or the forward motion. So I feel like because this is all a moving hold, I can start easing into that already. So you can think about that, and if that's too much right now, it's okay, because once you spline, you'll be clearly able to see that. So you can also leave it for that stage if you want to. And for the mouth, I want to actually relax that more. Pretty much just fully relax it at this point. And the pupil here is just grazing the lower eyelid, so I'm definitely gonna bring them a little lower. Maybe I can open the lower eyelid a little more if that looks good. And that seems to be working. Oh, and I can't forget, I had this cheek pushed up. And you can see that here, it's just very little, but I want to relax that. And because the mouth is already relaxing here, I'll do that here as well. Just start easing out of it. And the same thing will also apply to this lower eyelid. Something else you can do from time to time if you want to is just grab all your keys, change everything to Bezier. Now you can just scrub, and if there isn't any weirdness happening, then you should be good to go. And if there's something that's already feeling very abrupt and weird, then you can just adjust it at this point too. But we're still very early in, just 3 frames. But this is just another tool that you can use to check your animation. Now I'm gonna change it back to constant because that's how I want to be viewing it when I'm working. And let's go to frame 65, which is our next golden pose. So these markers are proving to be very helpful. I don't have to be scrubbing and just searching for which one I think is the next pose, or always scrubbing the video on the side. Everything is just there for me already. And now we have a pretty big change between these two poses. So the biggest thing definitely is the whole body is moving forward now because he's taking a step. So now I can determine how far he steps. If I went pose by pose, at this point I don't know how far forward the foot should be. Here I don't know how far it should be, and so on. But here I determine it myself first, and then everything else will fall into place. Let's first change to global for a second. Move forward. And I can see that the heel is still pretty much on the ground here. So I have to be careful and not overstretch my leg. So if I go too far, you can see it's starting to stretch. So whatever feels comfortable with the heel on the ground. So perhaps somewhere here. The body has definitely moved to the right. So I'll do that. Let's bring the foot forward. So I'm just gonna push it closer. And I'm going to lift the heel. I can go back to local now. I don't have to go too far up, but now that I did a little bit, you can see that the knee looks bent. I want it to be pretty straight, which means I can afford to go more forward with the foot. And I'm changing it to global because if I keep it in local and I go this way, the foot is also going further away from the body in this direction. And if I just use G, it's not gonna be on the ground exactly, or it might intersect the ground. So I just like using the arrows, and I'm just gonna go straight forward until the knee feels straight but not overextended. Something else that's gonna give us a little bit more leeway is the hip rotation. And this is something you might not fully see on the reference, but you want to add that. So just think back to our walk cycle video. The hip has to kind of work with the legs. So there is going to be a rotation. It's just really hard to see in reference videos sometimes, but you already know it's there. And also the hip is really pushed upwards here, which we don't need anymore because now this leg is taking over the weight. So this is kind of like a walk cycle. It's gonna be more straight. Okay, let's see what else. So I feel like we can still be a little bit more towards the left here with the center of gravity. And this is something that's hard to see with just flipping, but if I scrub, you can see the chest is leaning more forward. And I'm gonna apply that to this pose. And the reason why it's hard to see is just because he's walking towards us. But when you see the small changes, that's where you can tell. We also want to eliminate this forward tilt on the pelvis at this point. So I'll just make it more neutral. Lean the body forward, lean the chest forward. It also feels like the shoulders are more hunched forward at this point. So I'll just do the Z-axis. And overall, the chest is now facing more straighter or even more to the left. You see, the axis going through the body is like that. And at this point, it rotates the other way. So I'm kind of using both the cog and the chest to do that. The head is definitely a lot lower now, and it's more straight on. So let's do that. And now the chin is still pretty high up compared to what Brian has. So I'm just gonna help it some more. Push it forward, make it more hunched. And this controller is really nice because it helps with that hunched feeling, and it's also not affecting the hands. So you can really use that. And that's much better in my opinion. Something else I'm noticing is that the elbows are a lot closer to the body than what I have. And for silhouette purposes, I might want to have a little bit of a gap, but it feels too big. So let me push the elbows closer. That's way more relaxed. I can see the phone is tilted forward a lot more. And here my rotation on the phone is bigger than the reference, but I feel like it's working just because he is looking up here and then he's looking down at the phone again. So it's like he's tilting the phone and he's adjusting it to see the screen better. And at this point, the phone is rotated quite a bit and the hands aren't looking that great anymore, as you can see. It's just looking a little odd here. So I'm just gonna steal the pose I had from my example file because I already did it. I spent quite a long time making this, so I'm just gonna grab it quickly and just paste it onto here. Okay, so what I did is just in my action editor, I went to my previous finish animation, selected the controllers, grabbed the key, switch back to this action and just pasted that. And the hands might not be perfect, but I feel like this works. Let me just make sure there aren't intersections happening. And the typing on the phone, I'm just gonna add that later because I don't wanna be doing all these little keys here. And you can't really see it too much anyway, so I'm not gonna worry about that right now. It feels like we could bring the center of gravity a little lower. I'm actually looking at the shoulders here and it definitely looks like this shoulder should be higher and I have the opposite. So I'm just gonna quickly fix that. Maybe I'll use this controller, push the pose more, bring this shoulder a little higher. Let me go back to my graph editor. And because it's the exhale, I still want it to be lower than the previous pose. So the previous pose can just be pushed more. And for the zipper, I don't really like how it's going one way here and then straight here. I'm just gonna use my tweakers and key everything, key it on the previous pose too, just so it's not changing throughout the animation. Because I didn't have any keys here before, so I just want to anchor that. And now I'm just going to rotate them to make the transition smoother on the zipper. Now the eyes from close up, they look okay. They're just a little bit crescent moon shaped, and in terms of appeal, that's not the best in my opinion. So I'm just going to grab the corners of the eyes. There are 3 controllers here. I'll bring it lower. Just give the eyes a little bit of a smoother shape. And when you look from the perspective view, it's all messed up, but as long as it looks good in the camera view, you're fine. So now that's a little bit of a better shape. Even though in perspective view you can see it's kind of messed up here, but as long as it looks good here, you're fine. I'm just gonna quickly do the same on the other eye. And we can relax this eyebrow some more, make them more neutral. And I do have a little bit of rotation happening here. I'm gonna make it more straight now because it's a more straight on view. I don't want the face to feel like it's tilted to one side. Okay, and the wrist here is just slightly broken. It's not too bad. I feel like I could leave it, but maybe I'll push the hand more far away from the body to make that angle more relaxed. And push the eyes up more to look at the phone. And the very last thing I'll do is just lift these toes slightly so that I can have a little bit of overlap when the foot plants, and then the toes will plant maybe a frame or 2 after. And maybe add slightly more rotation here on the y-axis just for that extra little lean before he goes leaning back this way. So there's more sway on the body. And actually overall, flipping between these two poses, the biggest difference I'm noticing between the reference and Max is that Max is kind of staying in the same space. Even though he's moving forward, there isn't that much side to side compared to the reference. Although we also need to take into account that the camera is moving in the reference, so you can see that on the exercise machines, they're also traveling. But we do want to have some side to side change on Max. So I'll just grab global, grab the center of gravity and this foot, just push them to the right more. Okay, let's leave this pose the way it is for now and move on to the next one. So just press A, key it, and I see that I have some bezier happening here. So let me just quickly put constant there and go to frame 80 and key everything. So now we have keys on frame 80, and let's do the flipping again. So right away what I notice is there's a lot more weight on this right foot. The foot is fully planted on the ground as far as I can see. Yep. The other foot is not off the ground yet, but it has pivoted around the toes, and on the next frame the foot is gonna be off the ground. And you can see the body around here is pretty high and then it drops down. So not only is it lower, but there's a little bit of a compression on the chest, with the chest being rotated forward but also to the right. The face is also tilted this way now, as you can see. And that's pretty much it. So let's work on those things. So first of all, this foot is staying where it is. It's just gonna be planted, so I'm gonna zero out any rotation. And at this point, the toes are also gonna be planted, so zero that out. Let's push the center of gravity forward and above the leg. And it is gonna be lower, but not this low. So I'm gonna bring it up some. Now this foot, obviously right now it's super stretched, but we're gonna be pivoting from the toe. So let's do that. So not only does it pivot up, it also sways sideways. So first it goes a little bit inwards and then it goes out. So we want to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We can push this a little bit more forward. And obviously now there's pretty much no weight on this leg, so the pelvis has to be carrying all the weight. Now we have the opposite lean on the upper body, so let's do that. So I'm just grabbing the key in my graph editor and moving it there, but you can also do it right here, it doesn't matter. Grabbing the head. In terms of the X rotation, it's pretty much the same, I would say. Yeah, so you can see through here the head goes a little bit higher, but here it goes pretty much to the same X rotation as it was before. Because now the head is starting to lean this way, I would like to actually switch the rotation on these controllers for the face to be leaning that way a little bit. And that's just more appealing, in my opinion. So just these guys here, this one here, and this one. Just pushing that line of action through the head a little bit. Looking at the neck, it seems to be tilted sideways slightly, and maybe a little bit more forward. I might want to move this elbow away from the body slightly and then move the other one closer, just to support that lean. The whole chest is also slowly collapsing forward, and it continues doing so on the next frames, but I'm gonna start adding that. And maybe the weight can be even more over the screen right leg. And I'm noticing something I didn't do before. In terms of the sideways rotation on this foot, maybe now it can be more inwards. which it has to match on these two frames, so I'm just pasting that. And then here in this part of the animation, it could be more outwards. And I'm just gonna paste it onto these other frames. Actually, it could also be farther away from the body, is what I'm thinking. So grabbing all that, pasting it. And that adds a little bit more variety to the rotation. I don't want it to be the same. And sometimes you might not think of all of those little details right away, but as soon as you notice that, you can just go back and quickly add that, because it does look more interesting when there's change on several axes on all these parts of the body, especially seeing that in the reference video here as well. And gotta be careful, I made an adjustment, and again I did it on the wrong frame. I'll just grab everything, shift it to frame 80 to make sure I grab all of the keys. It seems like the phone would be tilted even more forward at this point. And you always gotta make sure it looks like Max is looking at the phone. I'm also gonna make an overall adjustment on these strings later, because now that he's bent forward, they're going through the body, but I just wanna do that later. I also have some rotation on the nose where I was swinging it this way. I'm just gonna Ctrl-C and Ctrl-Shift-V that, just to get the opposite, to work with that new line of action on the face. Okay, I think for now we can leave this pose and continue working. So let's go to the next golden pose on frame 93. So all the weight is still on this foot, but it seems like it continued traveling to the right around here, and then it's starting to slowly travel to the left because the screen left foot is now planted on the ground, and you can see it's still banked on the side right here. So as you go through and you start flipping, you want to keep a note of all the things you're noticing right away that are different from the previous key, and just kind of collect that information in your head and then start working on the pose, and then continue going back and forth to implement more stuff. So the upper body is leaning even more to the right, the head is turned more towards the right, the elbows are farther away from the body, and that's pretty much everything I'm noticing right now. So let's go ahead and start. Actually, I should also mention that the body continues moving forward. It's not stuck in place yet. So forward and going towards the left and leaning more towards the right. I'm gonna zero out the banking on the foot, bring it forward, and I have to be careful with the stretch on the leg. So now I can add more banking this way. The body is also starting to rotate this way, so that's counterclockwise. So let me add that. And right now the body's perfectly over that one foot. We can move it forward more because he's gonna be putting weight on the other foot and moving it forward more. So we want to continue that forward motion. Let's rotate the hip to match the direction of the feet and bring it a little higher on this side. This is the last frame before he starts switching the weight over to the other foot, so it will still be carrying everything here. Let's rotate the head. Bring out the elbows. So around here the phone drops and then it stays there, it just goes up a little. So let me bring that down slightly. The shoulders will probably go down a little as well. And just looking at it from the side, I still think we can travel more forward. I'll grab the cog and the foot, put it in global, push it more forward. just to give ourselves the room to continue traveling forward. There seems to be a little bit of a different angle on the phone. And these are just like small things that you don't necessarily have to copy exactly from the reference, but you can if you want to. The goal isn't to rotoscope everything exactly, but if you notice something, why not put it there, and then once you spline, if it's too much, then you can always take it out. Okay, let's go to frame 119. So now the weight has transferred onto the other foot, which is now fully planted. There is no banking on it. Obviously the pelvis is rotated the other way now. The body seems even more hunched forward, and it's still leaning to the right. So this is where we talked about the hip leading the action. So it's almost like a little bit of a drag on the upper body. But the head has rotated the other way now, which is starting to look similar to this first pose we had, but at the same time very different when you compare the two. The first one is way more upright, this one is way more hunched forward, and he looks like he's focusing on his phone even more. And then of course the screen right foot is now lifting off the ground, it's pivoting off the toes again, and afterwards the weight is gonna continue going slightly to the left but not much. And overall the whole body is now rotating clockwise. I'm trying to see if he's any more hunched than he was before, but it seems like he goes more upright through here and kind of stays in that position until here, and then he goes down again. He's rotating forward. So let's do that. Let's give him some forward rotation. Let's cancel the banking on the foot. There's some rotation here. That was probably by accident. Gotta be careful about that. So I meant to rotate this controller and I rotated the other one by accident. So let me just paste that here. You don't want to have the same action happening on several controllers because it's just harder to control afterwards when you want to make changes. Now I know there's no rotation or anything on this controller anymore because they're all connected like this, which means there is no change of value. So that was my bad. I was trying to see how it's hard to click sometimes. I was trying to rotate this controller and by accident I did this one and I didn't notice. But it's okay, it's fixed now. Just when you notice something like that, I would take the time to fix it because like I said, once you spline, you're gonna be fighting these controllers moving at the same time, doing the same thing, but you'll adjust one and you'll still have motion you might not want because it's coming from the other one. And that's just very messy. Okay, let's shift the weight over. Now this hip is gonna be carrying the weight. We can also rotate this way a little. And of course the direction of the legs, so the Y rotation. The whole body is leaning more this way. There's still that break in the body with the upper one dragging behind, but it's not as much as it was before. The head is facing the other way. And we gotta think about the neck too, because it was leaning one way, now it's kind of leaning the other way. Give him more hunch. I feel like the hands are traveling kind of low now. Let's bring them up. So the foot pivoting off the ground. It's definitely not as much as the other one was here. It's way more extreme than here. And this is where the shadows really help to see the difference. Otherwise it could look like this foot is still on the ground. And it's kind of pivoting outwards weirdly, like that. And we can't forget to have the body traveling forward. The body drops through here and it stays pretty low. So let's do that. And you can also see that with the knee being bent, and now this one is bent as well. before it was more straight. I feel like I need to rotate this chest this way more to really show that hunch here, but I need to counter animate the arms this way. Let me play with these spaces between the elbow and the body. I'm also gonna rotate the chest this way more. And if you want, there's a little bit of a bump on his neck. So you can just bring that forward like that. You're not really gonna see it from the front, but sometimes it's nice to do that as well. Bring the collar and the neck forward. And just paste it anywhere where it looks weird. See, it's so much better now. And here it looks fine. So the more he hunches forward, the more you wanna fix that neck to give it a nice curve. All right, and we have one more key to work on. Let's do that. So this is the interesting part where this foot just kicks forward a little and settles. So it's just a bit of a foot adjustment in that final pose. But I wanted to leave it there because I thought it was kind of cool. It added a little bit more texture to the exercise. So let's see, the weight continues going one way, the foot kicks, then the body travels to the right, and then it settles to the left. And I actually think I didn't have that as a golden pose when I was doing my sing sketch stuff, but I think here I do need one more golden pose where he travels to the right before he travels to the left again. And the reason why I need that is because right now what I need to do is take the cog towards the right, but I don't know how much because it travels more to the right and then it travels to the left. So it's really hard to tell where to bring it. So I'm gonna just go to this pose around frame 134 and I'll set a marker. I'm gonna move that key here. And this is what I'm gonna work on first. So first, let's move the foot forward. And it's hard to tell here, but from the side view, you can see it's still kind of behind the body. But from the reference, I think it's more forward because the heel ends here, and this one seems to be behind it. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then of course I have to bring all of the weight forward as well. And the foot is definitely too far from the body. So let's do this. So this is as far as the body travels to the right, which seems to be almost in the middle, but still leaning towards the left side. And because this leg is carrying some of the weight now, the pelvis would be more straight. You can see the head is way more sideways now. The body has rotated this way. Let's do some neck action too. Overall lean is more this way, but the upper chest is this way. And it feels like he's starting to be more straight. And then he continues getting more straighter on our last golden pose. So let's do that and just be subtle about it. Okay, cool, I think that's good. Now to our last pose. So I'm glad I did that because now you can see that clear difference that you wouldn't have been able to tell if you just went straight from here to here. It would be kind of hard to imagine what the pose is supposed to look like exactly without that contrast with this pose. So the body moves forward, the pelvis tilts back but also sideways. The whole upper body leans this way. The head is a little higher now. And the phone is kind of stiff in the hands. Everything is kind of rotating with the upper body. And the feet are pretty solid on the ground, I would say. All right. Really push that pelvis forward and this whole body needs to go back and sideways. And I'm gonna do that on the chest too. Maybe the neck should go to the side a little bit more as well. The head goes higher. And I feel like I need the side-to-side rotation to be more stronger. Yeah, that seems about right for now at least. And I'm gonna go take a break and we'll come back and work on the rest of the animation.